For years, Maxwell Pierce avoided discussing it. Surrounded by figures, business conquests, and a public image of absolute strength and control, the Boston tech billionaire never spoke about his infertility. The diagnosis came early, before his marriage to Eleanor. He preferred to keep the secret between four walls, opting not to pursue treatments. Eleanor, understanding and compassionate, remained by his side for nearly a decade. When she suddenly passed away from an aggressive cancer, Maxwell retreated from the world. He sold shares in companies, declined invitations to events, and distanced himself from the power routine that had defined him for so long. His penthouse atop the gleaming Pierce Technologies building in downtown Boston became his sanctuary and prison. Maxwell had built his empire developing specialized software systems for financial institutions, starting from his MIT dorm room 25 years earlier. By age 45, he controlled a technology conglomerate valued at over $20 billion, with offices across 3 continents. His name appeared regularly on Forbes lists, his opinions were quoted in the Wall Street Journal, and business schools used his rise to prominence as a case study in strategic innovation. But behind the carefully crafted public persona lay a private pain that only Eleanor had fully understood. The infertility diagnosis at 30 had shaken his sense of identity. "This doesn't change anything about us," Eleanor had insisted, her blue eyes fierce with conviction. She had been his college sweetheart, the daughter of a literature professor who balanced his analytical intensity with her artistic perspective. They had talked about adoption occasionally, but Maxwell's demanding career always provided a convenient reason to postpone such decisions. Then came Eleanor's diagnosis: pancreatic cancer, already metastasized. Despite access to the finest medical care consulting specialists worldwide, her decline was swift and merciless. "Don't disappear when I'm gone," she had whispered during her final weeks. "Promise me you'll find something beyond those algorithms and spreadsheets." Maxwell had nodded, made the promise, but in the 6 months following her departure, he had done exactly what she feared. He delegated daily operations to his executive team, cancelled speaking engagements, declined board meetings. His executive assistant, Sarah, became the gatekeeper protecting his isolation, fielding concerns from shareholders and executives with increasing difficulty. The only person Maxwell allowed regular access was Dr. Christopher Sullivan, his college roommate and now chief of oncology at Massachusetts General Hospital. Chris had been Eleanor's doctor, had fought alongside them during her illness, and understood Maxwell's grief better than anyone. "This isn't healthy, Max," Chris said during one of his increasingly frequent visits to the penthouse. It was a Tuesday evening in October, Boston's skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Maxwell stood by the glass wall, tumbler of scotch in hand, his reflection ghost-like against the city lights. At 46, his once dark hair showed prominent streaks of silver, and weight loss had sharpened his features. "I'm fine," Maxwell replied, the standard response that had become almost automated. "The company's stock is up 12% this quarter. The European expansion is proceeding ahead of schedule." Chris sighed, settling into one of the minimalist chairs that furnished the space. Eleanor's touch, the colorful textiles, art pieces, plants, had gradually disappeared from the apartment, leaving behind an austere, monochromatic environment that resembled a luxury hotel suite more than a home. "I'm not talking about Pierce Technologies. I'm talking about you, the human being." Maxwell didn't respond, continuing to stare at the city below. After a moment, Chris tried another approach. "Remember the Brighter Futures Foundation? The children's organization you and Eleanor supported?" Maxwell turned slightly. "What about it?" "They're opening a new residential center in Brookline next week. The Eleanor Pierce Wing for Educational Development." Chris watched his friend carefully. "I'm on their advisory board now. They'd be honored if you attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony." Maxwell's jaw tightened. "Send them a donation, double whatever they're expecting." "They don't need more money, Max. They've named a building after your wife. This matters." "I can't." The words came out harsher than intended. Maxwell softened his tone. "Not yet, Chris. Please understand." Chris stood, approaching his friend. "Hey, it's been 6 months, Max. Eleanor wouldn't want this." "Don't tell me what she would want," Maxwell snapped, immediately regretting the outburst. He set down his glass. "I'm sorry. That was unfair." Chris placed a hand on his shoulder. "1 hour. That's all I'm asking. The ceremony is private. No press, minimal attendance. You can leave immediately after. But Eleanor put her heart into this project. Her presence should be honored by yours. Maxwell closed his eyes briefly. Eleanor had indeed been passionate about brighter futures, spending countless hours designing educational programs for children with limited opportunities. It had been one of many philanthropic endeavors she championed while he focused on building his business empire. "When?" he finally asked. "Next Thursday morning. I'll pick you up at 9. The morning of the ceremony, Maxwell nearly cancelled 3 times. Only the thought of disappointing both Chris and Eleanor's memory kept him from retreating. He chose a conservative charcoal suit, noticing it hung looser than the last time he'd worn it. Sarah had arranged for a private entrance to avoid any potential media, though Maxwell doubted the opening of a children's center would attract much press attention. Chris arrived precisely at 9, looking surprised but pleased to find Maxwell ready. "You cleaned up well," he commented as they rode the private elevator down. "Almost look like your old self." Maxwell adjusted his tie uncomfortably. "Let's get this over with." The Brighter Futures Foundation occupied a renovated Victorian mansion set back from a tree-lined street in Brookline. The new wing, a modern addition that somehow complemented the historic architecture, featured large windows and a covered playground area. A small gathering of board members, staff and donors milled about the entrance, where a simple ribbon stretched across the doorway. Dr. Rebecca Collins, the foundation's director, approached immediately upon spotting Maxwell. "Mr. Pierce, this is an unexpected honor. We weren't sure you would join us today." She was a trim woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. Eleanor would be so proud to see the culmination of her vision. Maxwell nodded stiffly, uncomfortable with the attention. "Dr. Sullivan insisted I should be here." Rebecca smiled knowingly at Chris. "Well, we're grateful he succeeded. Would you like a brief tour before the ceremony?" Maxwell wanted to refuse to maintain the emotional distance he'd carefully constructed, but found himself agreeing. A brief one, yes. The new wing was impressively designed, open, filled with natural light, with classrooms equipped with advanced technology. Eleanor insisted on the best equipment, Rebecca explained as they walked. She believed these children deserved the same educational tools as the most privileged private schools. Maxwell nodded, remembering Eleanor's passionate arguments on this point. "She was right," he said quietly. As they approached the final classroom, Maxwell noticed a small figure separated from the others. A girl in a wheelchair positioned near the window, her back to the door, seemingly absorbed in a book. While other children had been gathered for the ceremony, she remained apart, completely still, except for the occasional movement of her hand to turn a page. "Who is that?" Maxwell asked, interrupting Rebecca's explanation of the curriculum. Rebecca followed his gaze. "That's Olivia Carter. She's 8 years old, one of our residential students. Why isn't she joining the ceremony with the others?" Rebecca's expression softened. "Olivia prefers solitude. She has some physical limitations from a childhood accident. She's been with us for about 3 years now, transferred from several other facilities." Maxwell found himself drawn to the girl's isolation. Something in her deliberate separation from the activities around her resonated with him. "Does she have family?" he asked. Rebecca hesitated. "No. She was abandoned at the hospital after her accident as an infant. The injuries left her with permanent motor impairments. She's had several potential foster placements that didn't work out. She seems focused on her book," Maxwell observed. "Olivia is extremely bright," Rebecca nodded, "but she presents certain challenges for potential adoptive families." "What challenges?" Maxwell asked, his eyes still on the small figure by the window. Rebecca lowered her voice slightly. "She doesn't speak. The doctors say there's no physical reason for it. Her vocal structures are intact, and cognitive tests show high intelligence. But she has never spoken a word, not in all the years she's been in the system." Maxwell found this information oddly compelling. "Never? Not even when she was younger?" "According to her records, no. She communicates through writing when necessary, but minimally." Chris, who had been quietly observing his friend's unusual interest, checked his watch. "The ceremony is starting in 5 minutes, Max." Maxwell nodded, but before turning away he noticed the girl had shifted slightly, her profile now visible. Her expression was solemn, contemplative, as if the book before her contained answers to questions far beyond her years. Something about that serious face, set apart from the excitement around her, struck Maxwell deeply. He followed Chris and Rebecca to the front entrance for the ribbon cutting, but his thoughts remained with the silent girl in the wheelchair. The ceremony was mercifully brief. Maxwell stood uncomfortably as Rebecca spoke about Eleanor's contributions to the foundation, her vision for educational equity, and her personal involvement in designing the new wing. When called upon to cut the ribbon, Maxwell performed the task mechanically, nodding acknowledgement to the small round of applause that followed. As the attendees moved inside for refreshments, Maxwell turned to Chris. "I need to leave now." Chris studied his friend's face. "You okay? You seem distracted." Maxwell wasn't sure how to articulate what he was feeling. "I'm fine. I've fulfilled my obligation." Before departing, Maxwell approached Rebecca once more. "The girl, Olivia, tell me more about her situation." Rebecca appeared surprised by the request. "Her case is rather complex, Mr. Pierce. The combination of physical needs and her nonverbal status makes placement difficult. Most families seeking adoption prefer children without such challenges." Maxwell nodded, processing this information. "Send me her file, medical history, educational assessments, everything." Rebecca's surprise deepened. "Mr. Pierce, those records are confidential. I couldn't possibly—" "For Eleanor's foundation," Maxwell clarified. "I'm considering establishing a specialized fund for children with complex needs. Olivia's case could provide valuable insights for structuring such support." It wasn't entirely a lie. The idea had formed as he spoke, though his interest was more specific than he was admitting. Rebecca seemed to accept this explanation. "I'll have my office prepare appropriate documentation, with identifying details removed, of course." "Thank you." Maxwell handed her his card with his private email address, handwritten on the back. "Send it directly to me." As the car pulled away from the foundation, Chris gave his friend a curious look. What was that about? "Since when are you interested in individual cases?" Maxwell stared out the window at the autumn leaves beginning to turn along the parkway. "The girl reminded me of something Eleanor once said, about how the most overlooked children often have the most to offer." Chris nodded slowly, not entirely convinced but willing to accept the explanation. "It's good to see you engaging with something regardless of the reason." A week later, Maxwell returned to Brighter Futures Foundation alone. No appointment, no announcement. He arrived in a modest sedan rather than his usual luxury car, dressed in casual clothes rather than his signature suits. Rebecca was visibly startled when her assistant announced his presence. "Mr. Pierce, we weren't expecting you." Maxwell remained standing in her office doorway. "I read Olivia's file, the redacted version you sent." Rebecca gestured for him to take a seat. "I see. Did it provide the insights you were seeking for your fund concept?" Maxwell sat, his posture unusually tense. "I'd like to observe some of your educational programs today, particularly any that Olivia participates in." Rebecca studied him carefully. "May I ask why your interest has focused so specifically on this child?" Maxwell had prepared for this question. "Her case represents exactly the type of situation my fund would address. Multiple placement failures, complex needs, educational potential that's likely being underserved." He paused. "I'd like to see your current approaches firsthand." Rebecca seemed to consider his request. "We have a reading program starting in 15 minutes that Olivia usually attends. You're welcome to observe, but I should warn you, she's extremely perceptive. She'll know she's being watched." Maxwell nodded. "I understand." As they walked toward the classroom, Rebecca added, "She hasn't had positive experiences with visitors showing interest. Several potential foster families have initially been engaged, only to withdraw when they understand the full scope of her needs." "I'm not a potential foster parent," Maxwell stated flatly. "This is purely professional interest." Rebecca gave him a look that suggested she wasn't entirely convinced, but she didn't press further. The reading session was held in a bright corner room with comfortable seating arranged in a semicircle. Several children were already gathered, but Olivia was positioned slightly apart, her wheelchair angled to see both the teacher and the book. Maxwell took a seat at the back of the room, trying to make himself inconspicuous. As the teacher began reading, Maxwell found his attention fixed not on the program itself, but on Olivia. Her focus was intense, her dark eyes tracking the illustrations as they were displayed. Once, just briefly, her gaze shifted to him, assessing before returning to the book. That fleeting moment of eye contact affected Maxwell strangely. There was something in her look, not childlike curiosity, but a measured evaluation that reminded him of himself. By his third visit to Brighter Futures, Maxwell had established a pattern. He arrived unannounced, usually mid-morning, dressed in understated clothing that wouldn't draw attention. The staff had grown accustomed to his presence, nodding respectfully as he made his way through the facility. He would sit quietly in the back of classrooms, observing educational programs, occasionally making notes on his phone. But everyone knew his attention invariably centered on Olivia. The girl seemed aware of his scrutiny, yet neither welcomed nor rejected it. She continued her routines, reading sessions, art therapy, limited physical activities adapted for her mobility challenges, with the same solemn focus, occasionally glancing in Maxwell's direction with that assessing gaze that continued to intrigue him. During his fourth visit, Rebecca finally confronted him in her office. "Mr. Pierce, while we appreciate your interest in our programs, I feel I must address the obvious. Your observations have focused almost exclusively on Olivia." Maxwell met her gaze steadily. "Is that a problem?" "It could be. Olivia has experienced significant abandonment trauma. Creating expectations that aren't fulfilled could be damaging." Maxwell frowned. "I haven't interacted with her directly. I've merely observed. Children are perceptive, especially children like Olivia. She notices your consistent presence." Rebecca leaned forward. "What exactly are your intentions here, Mr. Pierce?" It was a fair question, one Maxwell had been asking himself. Why was he drawn to this silent, watchful child? What was he hoping to accomplish with these visits? "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. The rare, honest answer surprising them both. "There's something about her situation that resonates with me." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Pierce—" "Maxwell, please." "Maxwell, I understand the impulse to connect with a child who seems to need intervention. But Olivia's needs are complex. Her case history includes multiple instances of well-intentioned people becoming overwhelmed by the realities of her care." Maxwell nodded. "I've read her file. 3 foster placement attempts, all ending when her nonverbal status proved challenging for the families. Medical needs requiring regular physical therapy. Cognitive assessment suggesting high intelligence coupled with significant trust issues." He paused. "What I haven't seen in those reports is any sustained effort to accept her on her terms rather than expecting her to adapt to conventional expectations." Rebecca studied him with new interest. "That's a perceptive observation. I've built a career understanding systems that don't work properly," Maxwell said with a slight shrug. "The foster care system clearly hasn't worked for Olivia." Rebecca sighed. "No, it hasn't. But what are you suggesting?" Maxwell considered the question. "For now, I'd like to continue observing. Perhaps, if appropriate, have some limited interaction with her." Rebecca seemed skeptical. "What kind of interaction?" "Nothing intrusive. Maybe sharing the same space during an activity she enjoys." After some consideration, Rebecca agreed. "The library hour this afternoon. Olivia usually spends that time browsing astronomy books. You could be present, but please, no pressure, no expectations." Maxwell nodded. "Understood." The Foundation's library was a warm, inviting space with natural wood shelving and comfortable seating arranged in small groupings. When Maxwell arrived, Olivia was already there, her wheelchair positioned near the science section. She was reaching for a book just beyond her grasp, her expression focused but not frustrated. Maxwell approached slowly, making sure she was aware of his presence. Without speaking, he retrieved the book, a large volume about the solar system, and handed it to her. Olivia accepted it with a small nod, her eyes briefly meeting his before returning to the book. Maxwell selected his own book from a nearby shelf, coincidentally about astronomy as well, and sat in an armchair positioned where she could see him, but not so close as to feel crowded. For nearly an hour they existed in parallel, each engaged with their reading, the silence between them comfortable rather than strained. Occasionally, Maxwell would glance up to find Olivia studying him, with that same evaluating gaze before returning to her book. As the session ended, Maxwell placed his book on the return cart. Before leaving, he wrote a brief note on a small card from his wallet and placed it on the table near Olivia. "The Hayden Planetarium has an excellent exhibit on exoplanets this month. Perhaps the Foundation could arrange a visit for interested students." He didn't sign it, But when he glanced back from the doorway, he saw Olivia carefully reading the card, her expression thoughtful. The following week, Maxwell arrived to find the foundation preparing for a field trip. "Your suggestion was well received," Rebecca explained as children boarded the small bus. "We're taking our advanced science group to the planetarium today." Maxwell nodded, pleased. "May I join you?" Rebecca hesitated. "It's not our normal protocol to have donors accompany field trips." "Not as a donor," Maxwell clarified, "as a volunteer assistant. I promise to be useful and unobtrusive." After some consideration, Rebecca agreed, though her expression remained cautious. During the planetarium visit, Maxwell stayed primarily with the general group, helping supervise the younger children while maintaining a respectful distance from Olivia. Still, he noticed how her face transformed during the presentation on exoplanets, the usual guarded expression giving way to genuine wonder as the dome above them filled with stars and distant worlds. For just a moment, she looked like any other 8-year-old, captivated by the mysteries of the universe. The transformation affected Maxwell profoundly. On the bus returning to the foundation, a staff member approached Olivia with a communication tablet, apparently her preferred method for expressing more complex thoughts. After typing briefly, the staff member turned to Maxwell, who sat across the aisle. "Olivia would like to know if you've seen the Galileo exhibit in the West Wing. She found it particularly interesting." Surprised by this indirect initiation of contact, Maxwell responded carefully, "I haven't had the chance. Perhaps next time I could see it." The staff member relayed this, and Olivia typed again. The message passed back was simple. It explains how he discovered Jupiter's moons with a primitive telescope. The drawings are precise despite his limited technology. Maxwell nodded. Precision often matters more than advanced tools. Some of the most important discoveries came from careful observation, rather than sophisticated equipment. He wasn't sure if Olivia would appreciate this philosophical observation, but after the staff member relayed it, he saw a brief expression that might almost have been a smile cross her face before she turned back to the window. This small exchange marked a turning point. During subsequent visits, Maxwell began bringing carefully selected gifts, not toys or typical children's items, but things that respected Olivia's evident intelligence and interests. A detailed star chart mapping the Northern Hemisphere, a book about women astronomers throughout history, a small high-quality telescope suitable for urban viewing. Each gift was presented without fanfare, simply left where she would find it with a brief note explaining its purpose or significance. Olivia accepted these offerings with the same solemn nods, but Maxwell noticed she used them frequently and kept them meticulously organized. In late November, nearly 2 months after his first visit, Maxwell arrived at the foundation to find Rebecca waiting for him with an unusually serious expression. "We need to talk," she said, leading him to her office. Inside, Maxwell was surprised to find Dr. Sullivan already seated. "Chris, what are you doing here?" Chris looked uncomfortable. "Rebecca called me. She was concerned about the direction of your involvement here." Maxwell turned to Rebecca. "What does that mean?" Rebecca gestured for him to sit. "Maxwell, your interest in Olivia has progressed beyond casual observation. The gifts, the regular visits, the special attention, it's creating a significant attachment dynamic. Is that problematic?" Maxwell asked, genuinely confused. "She seems to appreciate the interactions." "That's exactly the issue," Rebecca explained. "Olivia has begun looking for you. When you missed your usual Wednesday visit last week, she spent the entire afternoon by the entrance. The staff reported she seemed disappointed." Maxwell felt a complex mix of emotions at this information: pleasure that his absence had been noted, guilt for causing disappointment. "I had an unavoidable board meeting." "You don't owe us explanations," Rebecca said gently. "But this is why I asked Dr. Sullivan to join us. I'm concerned about the nature of this relationship and where it's heading." Chris leaned forward. "Max, Rebecca has shared her observations with me. I have to ask, what exactly are you doing here?" Maxwell bristled slightly. "I'm connecting with a child who interests me, supporting her educational development. Is that inappropriate?" "Not inherently," Rebecca answered, "but connections create expectations. Olivia has experienced profound abandonment. If you're building a relationship without clear intentions or boundaries, you risk adding another disappointment to her history." Maxwell felt defensive. I have no intention of disappearing from her life. Then what are your intentions? Chris asked directly. Because from the outside this looks like... He hesitated. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. Looks like what? Like you're trying to fill the void Eleanor left, Chris finished quietly. Like you're seeking a substitute for the family you couldn't have. The words landed like a physical blow. Maxwell stood abruptly. That's absurd, and frankly, offensive. Is it? Chris pressed. You've been virtually reclusive since Eleanor died. Then suddenly you're here multiple times weekly, focused intensely on a single child with no family connections. Maxwell paced the small office. You're overanalyzing this. I'm simply interested in Olivia's case. Max, Chris said gently. You bought her a telescope, that's not professional interest. Maxwell stopped pacing, struggling to articulate feelings he didn't fully understand himself. She's different, he finally said. The way she observes everything, processes information, maintains her dignity despite her circumstances. She reminds me of yourself, Chris finished softly. Maxwell didn't confirm this insight, but his silence was telling. Rebecca sighed. Maxwell, I don't question your genuine care for Olivia, but if you're developing a significant relationship with her, we need to discuss appropriate parameters and potential outcomes. What are you suggesting? Maxwell asked warily. If you wish to continue regular involvement in Olivia's life, we should formalize it, perhaps as a mentor through our structured program, which includes training and clear expectations. Maxwell considered this. And if I wanted to explore something more permanent? The question hung in the air. Rebecca and Chris exchanged glances. You mean fostering or adoption? Rebecca asked carefully. Maxwell nodded once, the idea crystallizing as he spoke. Potentially, eventually. Rebecca looked both surprised and concerned. That's a significant commitment, especially for someone with no parenting experience and demanding professional responsibilities. I'm aware, Maxwell said. It's not a decision I'd make impulsively, but I'd like to understand the process and requirements. Chris was studying his friend with a mixture of concern and something like hope. Max, are you sure about this? It's a massive life change. I'm not sure about anything, Maxwell admitted, except that I feel more purpose when I'm here, working to connect with Olivia, than I have since Eleanor died. The honesty in this statement seemed to affect both Rebecca and Chris. After a moment, Rebecca nodded. I can provide information about fostering requirements, but I want to be absolutely clear. Olivia's best interests must remain paramount. This would require significant adjustments to your lifestyle and priorities. I understand, Maxwell said, and I'd expect nothing less than thorough vetting. Over the following weeks, Maxwell approached the possibility with the same methodical thoroughness he applied to business acquisitions. He met with social workers, researched legal requirements for fostering and adoption, and consulted with specialists in childhood trauma and developmental psychology. He arranged for his penthouse to be evaluated for accessibility modifications and began researching schools with appropriate support services. When these preparations became known to the Pierce Technologies Board, concerns arose about Maxwell's focus and commitment to the company. His longtime CFO, Jonathan Meyer, requested an urgent meeting. The shareholders are getting nervous, Max, Jonathan explained in Maxwell's downtown office. There are rumors you're planning to adopt a special needs child. People are questioning your judgment and priorities. Maxwell leaned back in his chair. My personal decisions are not board business. They become board business when they affect company leadership. You've been distant for months since Eleanor's passing. Now this, Jonathan hesitated. It seems impulsive. It's not impulsive, Maxwell countered. It's carefully considered. Max, you're talking about becoming a single parent to a child with complex medical and psychological needs. How do you plan to balance that with running a multi-billion-dollar company? It was a fair question, one Maxwell had been considering himself. I'm exploring options, restructuring leadership, possibly appointing a COO to handle daily operations. Jonathan looked alarmed. You're serious about this? Completely. Maxwell met his CFO's gaze steadily. Jonathan, I've spent 20 years building this company. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I've come to realize there are other forms of legacy worth pursuing. After a moment, Jonathan nodded slowly. I can help structure a transition plan that would protect both the company's interests and provide you with the flexibility you're seeking, but the board will need reassurance. Schedule a full presentation for next month. I'll address their concerns directly. Meanwhile, Maxwell continued his regular visits to Brighter Futures, now structured as formal mentoring sessions. Under Rebecca's guidance, he and Olivia spent time together in supervised settings, library hours, educational activities, occasionally sharing meals in the communal dining area. Maxwell was careful not to mention the possibility of fostering, not wanting to create premature expectations. Olivia's communication remained primarily written, using either her tablet or traditional pen and paper. Her messages were concise, thoughtful, often surprisingly mature in perspective. She never asked personal questions about Maxwell, focusing instead on topics of shared interest: astronomy, mathematics, classical music, which Maxwell had discovered she enjoyed. One afternoon in early December, during a quiet moment in the library, Olivia passed Maxwell a folded note. Inside was a simple question: "Why do you keep coming back?" The directness of the inquiry caught Maxwell off guard. After careful consideration, he wrote back, "Because I find value in our conversations." Olivia studied his response, then wrote again, "Other people stop coming eventually." Maxwell felt the weight of this statement, the history of abandonment behind those 5 words. He replied, "I'm not other people." Olivia didn't respond immediately. She folded the paper carefully and placed it in the pocket of her cardigan. But something in her expression had shifted subtly. 2 days before Christmas, Maxwell arrived at the foundation with a specially selected gift. The staff had explained that while they celebrated the holiday, they kept gifts modest and educational to avoid disparities among the children. Maxwell had chosen accordingly a beautifully illustrated book about constellations and their mythology across different cultures. When he presented it to Olivia during their scheduled session, she examined it with her usual careful attention, turning pages slowly, studying the illustrations. Then she removed a small package from her wheelchair's side pocket and handed it to Maxwell. Surprised, he unwrapped it to find a handmade bookmark featuring a precisely rendered image of Jupiter and its moons. "This is beautiful," he said sincerely. "Did you make it?" Olivia nodded, watching his reaction closely. Maxwell carefully placed the bookmark between the pages of a journal he carried. "I'll use this every day. Thank you." For the briefest moment, something like a smile crossed Olivia's face. That evening, as Maxwell drove back to his penthouse through light snow, he realized a decision had solidified within him. The past 3 months of regular interaction with Olivia had been more meaningful than the previous 5 years of business achievements. The connection they had formed, though unusual and largely wordless, felt genuine and significant. He called Chris as soon as he arrived home. "I'm going to formally apply to become Olivia's foster parent," he said without preamble, "with intention to adopt if the placement proves successful." There was a moment of silence before Chris responded, "You're certain about this?" "More certain than I've been about anything since Eleanor died." Another pause. "You know this will be the hardest thing you've ever done. Harder than building your company, harder than losing Eleanor." Maxwell gazed out at the Boston skyline, lights twinkling through gentle snowfall. "I know, but it's also the most important." The following day, Maxwell met with Rebecca to formalize his intentions. Her reaction was cautiously supportive. "I've observed your interactions with Olivia carefully," she said. "There's a genuine connection there, but fostering is just the beginning of a challenging journey, especially with a child who has Olivia's history." "I'm prepared for that," Maxwell assured her. "I've already begun working with specialists to understand her specific needs." Rebecca nodded. "The process will take time. Home studies, background checks, parenting classes, psychological evaluations. Given your high profile and Olivia's special circumstances, everything will be scrutinized thoroughly." "I expect nothing less," Maxwell replied. "How do we begin?" "First, we need to determine if Olivia is open to this possibility. She is old enough that her preferences will be considered, even if she expresses them non-verbally." Maxwell felt a flutter of anxiety. "When will you discuss it with her?" "Tomorrow, if you're comfortable proceeding. Our child psychologist will facilitate the conversation using methods that work well with Olivia's communication style." Maxwell nodded, suddenly feeling the magnitude of what he was proposing. This wasn't a business decision that could be reversed if unsuccessful. This was a child's life, her sense of security and belonging. "What if she says no?" he asked quietly. Rebecca's expression softened. "Then we respect her choice. But based on my observations, I think she's formed a significant attachment to you already." The next morning, Maxwell waited anxiously in Rebecca's office while the psychologist, Dr. Wendy Park, spoke with Olivia privately. The 30 minutes felt longer than any board meeting or investor presentation he'd ever endured. When Dr. Park finally returned, her expression was professional but positive. "Olivia has indicated she would be comfortable with exploring a foster placement with Mr. Pierce," she reported. She expressed this clearly through her communication tablet. She did have questions about practical matters, whether she would continue her current therapies, if she could bring her books and telescope, if the placement might end suddenly. Maxwell felt both relieved and humbled by these practical concerns. What did you tell her? That these were excellent questions that would be addressed in detail as the process moved forward. That any transition would be gradual and carefully managed. Dr. Park studied Maxwell. She also asked, and I quote directly, "Why does he want me when no one else did?" Maxwell felt his throat tighten. "What was your response?" "I told her that different people connect with different people, and that sometimes connections form that transcend typical expectations or circumstances." She paused. "I also told her she could ask you directly." Maxwell nodded, already considering how he would answer such a question. "Thank you for handling this so thoughtfully." With Olivia's preliminary consent established, the formal process began. Maxwell's application as a prospective foster parent entered the system, triggering a comprehensive evaluation process. His wealth and prominence, while ensuring he could provide materially for a child, created additional scrutiny regarding his motivations and commitment. The business restructuring proceeded simultaneously. Maxwell appointed his longtime VP of Operations, Diane Rodriguez, as Chief Operating Officer with expanded authority. The board, after initial resistance, accepted the transition plan when Maxwell demonstrated his continued strategic involvement while delegating daily management. By late January, the penthouse renovations were complete. Doorways widened, a wheelchair-accessible bathroom installed, kitchen modifications made to accommodate Olivia's height and reach. An unused guest bedroom was transformed into a space designed with her interests in mind. Astronomy-themed decor, accessible bookshelves, a specialized desk with adaptive technology. A qualified live-in nurse with pediatric experience was hired to assist with Olivia's medical needs and provide continuity of care. As the foster parent evaluation progressed, Maxwell began spending more structured time with Olivia, supervised by foundation staff, but increasingly focused on building the rhythms and routines that would form their daily life if the placement was approved. They established communication patterns, learned each other's preferences, began developing the shorthand understanding that families naturally form. Throughout these interactions, Olivia remained primarily non-verbal, though her written communications became longer and more frequent. Her expressions, too, grew more readable to Maxwell. The slight narrowing of eyes that indicated skepticism, the barely perceptible lip curl that substituted for a smile, the focused attention that signaled genuine interest. One afternoon, as they worked side by side on a complex jigsaw puzzle of the night sky, Olivia suddenly passed him a note. "Are you sure you won't change your mind?" Maxwell read it twice, understanding the layers of insecurity behind the question. He wrote back, "I'm sure this isn't a temporary interest or obligation for me. This is a commitment." Olivia studied his response, then wrote again, "Even if I never talk." Maxwell didn't hesitate. "Your voice is yours to use or not use as you choose. I'm interested in who you are, not who others might expect you to be." Olivia folded this note carefully and placed it in her pocket, a gesture Maxwell had come to recognize as her way of preserving something meaningful. The evaluation process continued through February. Home visits, interviews with character references, financial reviews, psychological assessments. Maxwell approached each step with the same detailed preparation he would give to a major business negotiation, understanding that the stakes were infinitely higher. In early March, nearly 6 months after Maxwell's first visit to Brighter Futures, the fostering committee reached its decision. Rebecca called Maxwell personally to deliver the news. "The committee has approved your application as a foster parent for Olivia," she said, her voice warm with genuine pleasure. "Congratulations, Maxwell. This is just the beginning of a challenging journey, but I believe you're both ready for it. Maxwell felt an unfamiliar sensation, a lightness in his chest, a sense of purpose clearer than anything he'd experienced in business. When can we begin the transition? We'll start next week with day visits, then progress to overnight stays, gradually extending the time as Olivia adjusts. The full transition will likely take about a month. Maxwell nodded, though Rebecca couldn't see him. Thank you for everything, for seeing potential in this unusual situation. That's what we do here, Rebecca replied simply. See potential where others might not look. That evening, Maxwell stood in the newly prepared bedroom, surveying the space that would soon become Olivia's. The telescopes positioned by the window, the specialized bed with adaptive controls, the bookshelves filled with carefully selected volumes, the nightlight that projected constellations onto the ceiling. For the first time since Eleanor's death, the penthouse felt like it might become a home again. Outside, Boston's lights reflected off freshly fallen snow, the city beautiful in its winter dress. Maxwell thought about the silent, watchful child who would soon join him here, bringing her careful observations and precise understandings, about the ways they might grow together, two solitary people learning to form a family, about the promise he had made to Eleanor to find something beyond spreadsheets and algorithms. Perhaps this was it. Not what either of them had imagined, but meaningful nonetheless. His phone chimed with an incoming message from Rebecca. Told Olivia the news. Her response was to ask if she could bring her star chart to put on the wall of her new room. I think that's Olivia, for I'm excited but processing. Maxwell smiled, already recognizing that particular aspect of Olivia's communication style. He replied, "Tell her there's a perfect spot waiting for it, and for her." The transition began carefully, methodically, an approach that suited both Maxwell and Olivia. The first day visit lasted only 3 hours. Maxwell arrived at Brighter Futures on a sunny Tuesday morning in March to find Olivia waiting in the lobby, her backpack containing a few selected items positioned on her lap, her expression characteristically solemn. "Good morning, Olivia," Maxwell greeted her, keeping his tone casual despite the significance of the day. "Ready to see the apartment?" Olivia nodded once, her dark eyes watchful. Rebecca stood nearby with Dr. Park, both observing this first step with professional attention. "We've reviewed the schedule with Olivia," Rebecca explained. "She understands that she'll return here this afternoon and that these visits will gradually increase in duration." Maxwell knelt to Olivia's eye level. "I thought we might stop at the Museum of Science on our way. They have a new exhibit about Mars exploration that looked interesting." Olivia's expression remained neutral, but she gave another small nod. The Foundation's accessible van transported them to Maxwell's building, where the property manager had ensured the private elevator was ready and waiting. As they ascended to the penthouse, Maxwell noticed Olivia's hands tightening slightly on her wheelchair's armrests, a subtle sign of tension he had learned to recognize. "It's a big change," he acknowledged quietly. "We'll take it at whatever pace feels comfortable for you." The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer. Maxwell had deliberately decluttered the space, creating wide pathways for Olivia's wheelchair. Large windows showcased Boston's skyline, flooding the main living area with natural light. "Would you like a tour?" Maxwell asked. "Or would you prefer to explore one area at a time?" Olivia reached for her communication tablet, typing quickly. "Tour first, please." Maxwell guided her through the main living areas, the open concept kitchen with its newly installed lower countertop section, the living room with its unobstructed views, the study where he conducted most of his business when working from home. He had removed or repositioned furniture to ensure Olivia could navigate independently, a change that had inadvertently made the once formal space feel more inviting. "And this," he said finally, pausing before a closed door, "is your room, if you'd like to see it." Olivia typed, "Yes." Maxwell opened the door, allowing her to enter first. He had agonized over this space more than any other, wanting it to feel welcoming without being overwhelming. The room was spacious, with the same spectacular views as the rest of the penthouse. The walls were painted a soft blue-gray, reminiscent of twilight. A specialized bed with adjustable features occupied one wall, while a desk with adaptive technology faced the windows. Bookshelves filled with astronomy texts, science fiction novels, and classic literature lined another wall. Near the window stood the telescope he had given her, now mounted on a custom platform at perfect wheelchair height. Olivia wheeled herself slowly around the perimeter, examining everything with careful attention. She paused at the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines of several volumes. Then she moved to the closet, which had been modified with lower hanging bars and accessible drawers. Finally, she approached the window, looking out at the city spread below. Maxwell waited silently, allowing her to process the space at her own pace. After several minutes, Olivia turned and typed, "Thank you. It's very nice." The simplicity of the response might have seemed underwhelming to someone who didn't know her, but Maxwell recognized it as genuine appreciation. "I wanted it to be comfortable for you," he said. "If there's anything you'd like to change or add, we can do that any time." Olivia nodded, then typed, "Where is your room?" "Just down the hall," Maxwell answered, sensing her underlying concern about proximity. "Close enough if you need anything, but with privacy for both of us." This seemed to satisfy her. They spent the next hour in the kitchen, where Maxwell had arranged a simple lunch prepared according to Olivia's dietary preferences, information gleaned from Foundation staff. He had been surprised to discover she enjoyed cooking shows and had some interest in food preparation despite her limited mobility. "I've found some adaptive cooking tools," he mentioned as they ate. "If that's something you'd like to explore." Olivia typed, "I watched Food Network at the Foundation when I couldn't sleep." Maxwell nodded. "Insomnia?" Olivia considered this, then typed, "Sometimes. My brain doesn't stop easily." "I understand that," Maxwell said with a small smile. "I've had the same issue my entire life." After lunch, they visited the Museum of Science as planned. Maxwell had arranged for special access to minimize crowds and waiting, though he was careful not to make this obvious to Olivia. He wanted their outings to feel as normal as possible, not highlighted by his wealth or influence. The Mars exhibit proved engaging for both of them. Maxwell found himself genuinely interested in Olivia's observations, communicated through brief notes and occasional gestures. Her perspectives were unique, often focusing on details others might overlook. At one point, she typed a question about the communication delay between Mars rovers and Earth controllers that prompted Maxwell to seek out a museum docent for a more technical explanation than the exhibit provided. The 3-hour visit concluded with their return to brighter futures. As they reached the Foundation entrance, Maxwell felt an unexpected reluctance to end their time together. "I enjoyed today," he said simply. "I hope you did too." Olivia nodded, then typed, "When will the next visit be?" "Thursday, if that works for you. A bit longer this time. We could have dinner at the apartment." Another nod, this one accompanied by the slight lip curl that constituted her version of a smile. Inside, Rebecca and Dr. Park conducted a brief debrief with Olivia while Maxwell waited. When they emerged, Rebecca's expression was professionally optimistic. Olivia has indicated she's comfortable proceeding with the transition schedule as planned. She found the apartment suitably accessible and appreciated the room preparations. The following visits followed a similar pattern, gradually increasing in duration. A 5-hour visit that included preparing dinner together, an all-day Saturday excursion to the New England Aquarium, followed by an evening at the penthouse. The first overnight stay, with Rebecca conducting morning and evening check-ins by video call. Each step was documented, evaluated, adjusted as needed. Throughout the process, Maxwell consulted regularly with specialists, Dr. Park regarding psychological aspects, physical therapists about home adaptations, educational consultants about schooling options once the placement was finalized. Olivia's medical team provided detailed instructions for her daily care routine, which included medication management, physical therapy exercises, and monitoring of her specific health markers. By mid-April, Olivia was spending 3 nights a week at the penthouse. Jennifer Davis, the live-in nurse Maxwell had hired, established a professional but warm relationship with her, providing consistent support while respecting her independence. Maxwell had restructured his work schedule entirely, conducting meetings virtually when possible, and limiting office appearances to times when Olivia was at the Foundation or engaged with her tutors. The transition hadn't been without challenges. During the second overnight stay, Olivia experienced a nightmare that left her disoriented and distressed. Unable to call out verbally, she had pressed the emergency button Maxwell had installed beside her bed. He had found her trembling, her breathing rapid, her eyes wide with fear. Uncertain how to help, he had simply sat nearby, speaking softly until her breathing calmed, then offered her tablet so she could communicate if she wished. She had typed only, "Bad dream." "Sorry to wake you." "Never apologize for that," he had responded. "That's exactly what I'm here for." After that incident, they developed a more structured bedtime routine. Maxwell would sit in the comfortable chair near her bed, reading aloud from whatever book they had selected, currently Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, until Olivia indicated she was ready to sleep. This ritual seemed to reduce the nightmares significantly. There were other adjustments too. Maxwell, accustomed to near-absolute autonomy, found himself consulting another person's preferences and needs in ways that were both challenging and unexpectedly rewarding. His mealtimes, once irregular and often skipped entirely, became consistent to accommodate Olivia's medication schedule. His living spaces, previously arranged for aesthetic perfection rather than function, evolved to become more accessible and livable. His communication style, typically direct and sometimes abrupt in business contexts, softened and developed greater patience. By early May, the final phase of the transition was approaching. Olivia would move permanently to the penthouse, visiting brighter futures only for certain therapeutic services until alternative providers could be arranged. On the evening before this significant step, Maxwell sat with Olivia in what had become their favorite spot, the window seat in the living room that offered spectacular sunset views over Boston Harbor. "Tomorrow's a big day," he said, carefully gauging her reaction. "How are you feeling about it?" Olivia considered the question with her usual thoughtfulness before typing, "Nervous, but okay." "That's understandable," Maxwell assured her. "I'm a bit nervous too." This admission seemed to surprise her. She typed, "Why?" Maxwell smiled slightly. "Because I want to get this right, to make this a real home for you." Olivia studied him, then typed a question that caught him off guard. "Why did you choose me?" It was a fundamental question, one Maxwell had anticipated eventually but still found challenging to answer appropriately. How to explain the complex resonance he had felt with this silent, watchful child? How to articulate something he didn't fully understand himself without creating unrealistic expectations? "I think," he said slowly, "we recognized something in each other. A way of seeing the world, perhaps, of processing it, of maintaining dignity through difficult circumstances." He paused, then added, "And I admire your courage, your resilience, your determination to engage with life on your own terms." Olivia absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. Then she typed, "What if I'm not what you expected? What if this doesn't work?" The question revealed a vulnerability beneath her composed exterior that touched Maxwell deeply. "Olivia, relationships aren't about meeting predetermined expectations. They're about growing together, adapting, discovering who we are in connection with each other." He met her gaze directly. "I'm committed to making this work, whatever that requires. This isn't a trial period for me. This is a lifetime commitment." Something shifted in Olivia's eyes, a subtle softening, perhaps the first glimmer of true belief in his permanence. She typed, "Thank you for coming back, for noticing me." Maxwell felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you for giving me the chance to know you." The permanent move proceeded smoothly the following day. Olivia's remaining possessions from brighter futures, surprisingly few for a child who had lived there for years, were transported to the penthouse. Maxwell had arranged a small welcome dinner with just 3 guests, Chris Sullivan, Rebecca Collins, and Dr. Park. The evening was deliberately low-key, focused on establishing a sense of continuity between Olivia's past support system and her new home. As Rebecca prepared to leave, she took Maxwell aside. "You've done remarkably well with the transition," she said quietly. "But I want to prepare you. There will likely be a testing period ahead." Maxwell looked confused. "Testing? We've been through months of evaluation." Rebecca smiled slightly. "Not that kind of testing. Now that Olivia feels somewhat secure, she may begin testing boundaries, perhaps even trying to provoke rejection to confirm whether your commitment is genuine. It's common with children who've experienced abandonment." Maxwell nodded, taking this warning seriously. "What should I expect? What's the best response?" "Consistency is key. Maintain boundaries while reinforcing your commitment. And remember, behavior is communication. If challenging behaviors emerge, look for the underlying message. Sure enough, within weeks of the permanent placement, subtle changes appeared in Olivia's behavior. She began refusing certain foods she had previously accepted, ignoring agreed-upon bedtime routines, sometimes deliberately knocking items off surfaces where she could reach them. These behaviors were mild compared to what many foster parents experienced, but they represented significant shifts for a child who had been almost preternaturally cooperative. Maxwell responded, as Rebecca had advised, with consistency, calm, and continued presence. When Olivia refused dinner, he simply said, "That's your choice. The food will be available if you change your mind." When she ignored bedtime, he maintained the routine from his end, continuing to read aloud even when she appeared not to be listening. When she knocked items down, he helped her pick them up without comment or criticism. The testing phase reached its peak one evening in June. Maxwell had arranged an important video conference that couldn't be rescheduled, coinciding with Olivia's usual dinner time. He had explained the situation to her that morning, and Jennifer had prepared to supervise the meal. But when the time came, Olivia refused to eat with Jennifer, repeatedly wheeling herself to Maxwell's closed office door and knocking loudly enough to be heard on the call. After the third interruption, Maxwell excused himself from the conference, put the call on mute, and opened the door to find Olivia with an expression that combined defiance and fear. "Olivia, I explained that this meeting is important. I'll be finished in 20 minutes. She shook her head, knocking her wheelchair deliberately against the doorframe. Maxwell knelt to her level, keeping his voice calm. "I understand you're upset, but this behavior isn't acceptable. Jennifer is waiting to have dinner with you." Olivia's face flushed with anger, a rare display of emotion. She reached for her tablet and typed in large letters, "You're just like the others. Work is more important." The accusation stung, but Maxwell recognized the fear beneath the anger. "No, Olivia, I'm not like the others. I'm here, I'm committed to you, and I'm not going anywhere. But part of respecting each other means understanding that sometimes we have obligations we need to fulfill." He paused, then added, "I promise I'll join you as soon as this meeting ends. And tomorrow we'll talk more about how we can handle these situations better in the future." Olivia stared at him for a long moment, seemingly searching for evidence of insincerity. Then, without further communication, she wheeled herself away from the door. Maxwell returned to his meeting, distracted but professional. When he emerged 20 minutes later as promised, he found Olivia and Jennifer at the dinner table, Olivia picking unenthusiastically at her food. He joined them without comment about the earlier incident, engaging in their usual dinner conversation. That night, as Maxwell read the customary bedtime chapter, Olivia suddenly reached for her tablet and typed, "I'm sorry about before." Maxwell paused in his reading. "Thank you for apologizing. I understand it was coming from a place of worry." She typed again, "I thought maybe you were tired of me already." The simple admission revealed volumes about her past experiences and lingering insecurities. Maxwell closed the book and gave her his full attention. "Olivia, I need you to understand something important. My commitment to you isn't conditional on perfect behavior. We'll have disagreements, we'll both make mistakes, but that doesn't change the fact that this is your home now, permanently." Olivia seemed to consider this carefully before typing, "Promise?" "I promise," Maxwell said firmly. "You're stuck with me." For the first time in their months of interaction, Olivia's mouth formed a full, genuine smile, brief but unmistakable. It transformed her serious face completely, revealing the child beneath the careful exterior. Maxwell felt something shift permanently in his heart at the sight. The testing behaviors gradually subsided after that night. In their place came a new phase of adjustment, as they established the rhythms and boundaries of their shared life. Maxwell consulted with Dr. Park about appropriate discipline approaches that respected Olivia's autonomy while providing necessary structure. Together, they developed a system based on natural consequences rather than punitive measures, with clear expectations and consistent follow-through. By midsummer, a new normal had emerged. Weekday mornings began with Olivia's medical routine, supervised by Jennifer, followed by breakfast with Maxwell. Educational sessions with private tutors occupied most mornings, while afternoons included therapy appointments, recreational activities, and free time. Evenings belonged to Maxwell and Olivia exclusively. Dinner together, often followed by documentaries or educational programs they both enjoyed. Then the established bedtime reading ritual. Weekends featured outings to museums, parks, or cultural events, carefully selected to accommodate Olivia's energy levels and accessibility needs. Throughout these months, Olivia's communication remained primarily written, though Maxwell noticed her facial expressions becoming more varied and readable. She had begun using a sophisticated communication app that allowed for more nuanced expression than basic typing, incorporating predictive text and customized shortcuts for frequently used phrases. Dr. Park, who continued weekly sessions, reported significant progress in Olivia's emotional development and attachment capacity. "She's forming a secure bond with you," she explained during one of their regular consultations. "The consistency and responsiveness you've shown are exactly what she needed." Maxwell nodded, grateful for the professional validation, but more focused on his daily observations. "She seems more comfortable expressing preferences and opinions, less concerned about potential rejection if she disagrees with me." "That's significant progress," Dr. Park confirmed. "It indicates growing trust in the relationship's stability." In August, as the foster placement approached its 4-month mark, Maxwell initiated discussions about formal adoption. Rebecca had advised that while the typical waiting period was 6 months, exceptions could be considered when placement was clearly successful and in the child's best interests. "I'd like to begin the legal process," Maxwell told Rebecca during their monthly review meeting. "Olivia and I have discussed it, and she's indicated she's comfortable proceeding." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. Her adjustment has been remarkable. "The reports from Dr. Park, Jennifer, and her educational team are unanimously positive." She paused. "However, there are additional considerations with adoption. The court will want to hear directly from Olivia about her wishes. Given her non-verbal status, that presents certain challenges." Maxwell had anticipated this issue. "We've been working with her speech therapist on alternative communication approaches that would satisfy legal requirements. Her tablet communications are increasingly sophisticated and personalized, clearly her authentic voice." "That may be sufficient," Rebecca acknowledged, "but be prepared for additional scrutiny. The system isn't always adaptable to children who communicate differently." The adoption attorney Maxwell retained, Miriam Goldman, was more direct in her assessment. "Mr. Pierce, while Olivia's written communications are impressively articulate, family court judges typically prefer verbal confirmation of a child's wishes in adoption proceedings. It provides a level of spontaneity that written responses might not convey." Maxwell felt a familiar frustration rising. That standard disadvantages children with communication differences. "Olivia's written expressions are her authentic voice." Miriam nodded sympathetically. "I agree entirely, and will make that argument forcefully. I'm simply preparing you for potential challenges in the process." As predicted, the adoption petition faced additional scrutiny. The court appointed a guardian ad litem, an attorney named David Chen, to represent Olivia's interests independently. Chen conducted multiple interviews with Olivia, Maxwell, and everyone involved in her care. His preliminary report acknowledged the successful placement, but noted, "While the child appears to have formed a significant attachment to Mr. Pierce, her non-verbal status makes it difficult to assess her full understanding of and consent to permanent adoption. Additional evaluation is recommended." Maxwell found this assessment infuriating. "She communicates clearly and extensively through writing and digital means," he argued during a meeting with Chen. "Requiring verbal communication discriminates against her specific needs and capabilities." Chen remained professionally neutral. "Mr. Pierce, I understand your frustration, but the court has established protocols for ensuring children's voices are heard in these proceedings. We need to work within that system while advocating for appropriate accommodations." Dr. Park suggested a potential solution, a comprehensive psychological evaluation documenting Olivia's communication patterns, cognitive understanding, and emotional attachment. The resulting report would address the court's concerns about her capacity to consent meaningfully to adoption. "This isn't ideal," Dr. Park acknowledged. "It subjects Olivia to additional assessment when she's already made her preferences clear, but it may satisfy the legal requirements." Maxwell discussed the situation with Olivia directly, explaining the challenges in age-appropriate terms. "The judge needs to be absolutely certain this is what you want," he explained one evening as they sat in the living room. Because you communicate differently than most people, they want extra information to be sure. Olivia considered this, then typed, "They think I don't understand because I don't talk." Something like that, Maxwell admitted. "Which isn't fair or accurate, but it's what we're dealing with." Olivia typed again, her expression determined. "I'll do whatever evaluations they want. This is my home now." The comprehensive evaluation was conducted over several weeks by an independent psychologist specializing in children with communication differences. Dr. Eliza Montgomery observed Olivia in multiple settings, reviewed her educational assessments, analyzed samples of her written communication, and conducted specialized cognitive testing. Her report was unequivocal. Olivia Carter demonstrates age-appropriate understanding of the adoption process and its implications. Her written communications show consistent, authentic expression of her desire to be adopted by Maxwell Pierce. Her non-verbal status does not impair her capacity to provide informed consent in this matter. Armed with this professional assessment, Miriam Goldman filed a motion requesting the court accept Olivia's written statements as legally valid expressions of her wishes. The motion included examples of Olivia's daily communications, documentation of her consistent preference for adoption, and expert testimony regarding alternative communication approaches. The hearing was scheduled for September 15th, coincidentally, exactly 1 year after Maxwell's first visit to Brighter Futures Foundation. As the date approached, Maxwell found himself unexpectedly anxious. The business leader who had navigated billion-dollar negotiations without breaking a sweat now found himself lying awake at night, worrying about legal technicalities and procedural requirements. His concern wasn't for himself, but for Olivia, the potential impact of further delays or complications on her sense of security and belonging. The morning of the hearing, Maxwell helped Olivia select an appropriate outfit, a navy blue dress with a cardigan that she had chosen during a recent shopping trip. As Jennifer assisted with her preparations, Maxwell noticed Olivia seemed unusually tense, her movements more rigid than normal. "Nervous about today?" he asked gently. Olivia nodded, then typed, "What if the judge says no?" Maxwell knelt beside her wheelchair. "Then we appeal. We present more evidence. We keep trying until they understand." He paused, then added, "But Miriam thinks we have a strong case. Dr. Montgomery's report was very clear." Olivia typed again, her question direct as always. "Will they make me talk?" Maxwell had discussed this possibility extensively with both Miriam and Dr. Park. "They might ask if you're willing to speak, but Miriam will explain that writing is your preferred communication method. You don't have to do anything that makes you uncomfortable." Olivia seemed to accept this, though her expression remained concerned. As they prepared to leave for the courthouse, she typed one more message. "No matter what happens today, thank you for choosing me." Maxwell felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Olivia, choosing you was the best decision I've ever made. Whatever the judge decides today, we're family. Nothing changes that." The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone facade imposing in the September sunshine. Maxwell took a deep breath, steadying himself for whatever challenges lay ahead. He placed a reassuring hand on Olivia's shoulder as Jennifer helped her from the car into her wheelchair. "Ready?" he asked. Olivia nodded once, her expression serious but determined. Together they approached the entrance, prepared to navigate the final legal hurdles in their journey toward becoming a permanent family. The Suffolk County Courthouse was bustling when Maxwell and Olivia arrived. Jennifer helped navigate Olivia's wheelchair through security, while Maxwell conferred briefly with Miriam Goldman, who waited in the lobby. "Judge Patricia Winters is presiding today," Miriam informed him quietly. "She's known for being thorough but fair. She has some experience with cases involving children with special needs." Maxwell nodded, absorbing this information. "And Chen, the guardian ad litem? He'll be presenting his final assessment. Based on our last conversation, I believe it will be generally favorable, though he may still raise concerns about Olivia's non-verbal status." Maxwell glanced toward Olivia, who was watching their exchange with characteristic attentiveness. "She understands everything at stake here," he said. "Her communication may be different, but it's entirely clear." "I know that," Miriam assured him, "and we have Dr. Montgomery's report to support that position. Just remember to let me address any procedural issues that arise." They proceeded to the designated courtroom, finding it smaller and less imposing than Maxwell had imagined. Rebecca Collins was already seated in the gallery, along with Dr. Park and, surprisingly, Chris Sullivan. Maxwell hadn't expected his friend to attend. Chris offered a supportive nod as they entered. Miriam guided them to the front table, arranging Olivia's wheelchair in the space provided. Maxwell noted that Olivia's posture had become even more rigid, her hands gripping the armrests tightly. He leaned close to her. "Everything will be fine," he whispered. "Just be yourself." A side door opened, and Judge Winters entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and an expression of measured authority. Everyone rose as the clerk announced the commencement of proceedings. Maxwell remained standing as the others sat, feeling oddly vulnerable in this unfamiliar environment, where his wealth and business influence held no special weight. Adoption petition in the matter of Olivia Marie Carter, case number JA 2025-0473, the clerk announced. Petitioner Maxwell Thomas Pierce is present with counsel Miriam Goldman. Guardian ad litem David Chen is present. This is a hearing to determine the suitability of permanent adoption. Judge Winters adjusted her glasses, reviewing the file before her. "Ms. Goldman, you may proceed." Miriam rose confidently. "Your Honor, we are here today seeking approval for the adoption of Olivia Carter by Maxwell Pierce. Mr. Pierce has been Olivia's foster parent for the past 4 months, following an extensive transition period and comprehensive evaluation process. All required home studies, background checks, and psychological assessments have been completed and are included in your case file." The judge nodded. "I've reviewed those documents. They appear to be in order. However, I note some unusual circumstances in this case. Mr. Chen, please present your assessment as guardian ad litem." David Chen approached the podium, his manner professionally neutral. "Your Honor, I've conducted a thorough evaluation of this placement, including multiple interviews with Olivia Carter, Maxwell Pierce, and all professionals involved in Olivia's care. There is substantial evidence that this placement has been beneficial for Olivia's development and emotional well-being." He paused. "However, I must note certain complexities. Olivia's non-verbal status presents challenges in directly ascertaining her wishes regarding permanent adoption. While she communicates through writing and digital means, these methods lack the spontaneity and nuance of verbal communication." Maxwell felt his jaw tighten at this assessment, but Miriam placed a restraining hand on his arm. Chen continued, "That said, Dr. Montgomery's evaluation provides compelling evidence of Olivia's cognitive understanding and capacity to consent. Her consistent written expressions indicate a clear preference for adoption by Mr. Pierce." Judge Winters considered this information. "Mr. Pierce, please stand." Maxwell rose, attempting to project confidence despite his internal anxiety. "Mr. Pierce, you've had a successful career building Pierce Technologies into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Your work has historically required extensive travel and long hours. How do you reconcile those demands with the responsibilities of being a single parent to a child with special needs?" The question was direct, but not unfair. Maxwell had prepared for it extensively with Miriam. "Your Honor, I've implemented significant changes to both my professional role and personal priorities. I've appointed a chief operating officer who handles day-to-day operations, allowing me to focus on strategic direction while maintaining a consistent presence for Olivia. I've eliminated non-essential travel and restructured my schedule to accommodate Olivia's educational and therapeutic needs." The judge made notes. "And these changes are sustainable long-term?" The court's concern is always for stability and permanence in a child's life. "Yes, Your Honor. These aren't temporary accommodations, but permanent restructuring of my professional responsibilities. My commitment to Olivia takes precedence over business considerations." Judge Winters turned her attention to the documents before her. "I see from Dr. Montgomery's report that Olivia has never spoken verbally, despite having no physical impediments to speech. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Maxwell confirmed. "Olivia communicates primarily through writing, using both traditional methods and specialized digital applications." The judge looked directly at Olivia for the first time. "Olivia, I understand you prefer to communicate through writing. Is that accurate?" Olivia nodded, reaching for her tablet. The judge continued, "I'd like to ask you some questions about your wishes regarding this adoption. Would you be comfortable answering using your tablet? Olivia nodded again, positioning her device. Very well, Judge Winters said. Olivia, do you understand what adoption means legally? Olivia typed quickly. Her response projected onto a screen that had been set up for this purpose. It means Maxwell would become my legal father permanently. I would have his last name. He would make all decisions about my care and education. The judge nodded. That's correct. And is this something you want? Olivia's response was immediate. Yes, very much. Can you tell me why? Olivia's fingers moved across the screen, her expression concentrated. He sees me as a person, not just a problem to solve. He respects how I communicate. He makes me feel safe and valued. He came back when others didn't. Maxwell felt a wave of emotion at these words, struggling to maintain his composure in the formal setting. Judge Winters continued, Olivia, have you ever felt pressured by Mr. Pierce or anyone else to agree to this adoption? Olivia shook her head emphatically, then typed, No. Maxwell always says my feelings and choices matter. He asked if I wanted this, but said it was completely my decision. The judge studied her for a moment. Olivia, I notice you refer to Mr. Pierce by his first name. Is that your preference? Olivia typed, Yes. We discussed what I should call him. He said I could use whatever felt comfortable to me. Judge Winters nodded, then posed a question that caught everyone by surprise. Olivia, is there any reason you choose not to speak verbally? I understand from medical reports that you are physically able to do so. The courtroom fell silent. Maxwell tensed, concerned about this unexpected line of questioning. Miriam shifted slightly, prepared to object if necessary. Olivia herself appeared momentarily unsettled, her hands hovering above her tablet. After a pause, she began typing, her response appearing word by word on the screen. I stopped talking after the accident when I was a baby. I don't remember deciding not to speak. It just happened. Over time, silence became safer. People who were supposed to care for me kept leaving. Not talking became a way to protect myself. The raw honesty of this response seemed to affect everyone in the courtroom. Judge Winters' expression softened slightly. Thank you for that explanation, Olivia. I appreciate your candor. She turned to Chen. Mr. Chen, do you have any further concerns or recommendations regarding this adoption? Chen approached the podium again. Your Honor, based on my complete assessment, including today's observations, I believe this adoption would serve Olivia's best interests. Mr. Pierce has demonstrated consistent commitment to her welfare, and Olivia has clearly expressed her desire for this permanent placement. This unequivocal recommendation visibly relieved Maxwell. Judge Winters reviewed her notes once more, then addressed the court. This case presents unique circumstances that require careful consideration. The court's paramount concern is always the child's best interests and ensuring their voice is genuinely heard in the process. She looked directly at Olivia. Olivia, I have one final question for you. If this adoption is approved, making Mr. Pierce your legal father, what are your hopes for your future together? Olivia considered the question carefully before typing. I hope we can continue learning from each other. I hope to study astronomy seriously someday. Mostly, I hope to keep building our family. Just the two of us understanding each other, when words aren't always necessary. Maxwell blinked rapidly, moved by the simple eloquence of her response. Judge Winters nodded, seemingly satisfied. Thank you, Olivia. She turned to Maxwell. Mr. Pierce, the same question to you. What are your hopes for this family you're seeking to create? Maxwell hadn't anticipated this question, but found the answer came naturally. Your Honor, my hope is to provide Olivia with the security, opportunity, and understanding she deserves, to support her remarkable intelligence and unique perspective, to learn from her resilience and courage. He paused, then added, Eleanor, my late wife, once told me that life's greatest achievements aren't measured in financial success, but in meaningful connections. Olivia has taught me the truth of that wisdom. Judge Winters considered all she had heard, then made her decision. Based on the evidence presented, including comprehensive professional evaluations, consistent testimony from all parties, and Olivia's clearly expressed wishes, I find this adoption to be in the child's best interests. The petition for adoption is hereby approved. Relief washed over Maxwell. He turned to Olivia, whose eyes had widened slightly, her version of surprise and delight. There are some final documents to sign, Judge Winters continued. Ms. Goldman, please approach with Mr. Pierce for completion of the necessary paperwork. As Maxwell followed Miriam to the clerk's desk, he glanced back at Olivia, who was receiving quiet congratulations from Jennifer. Something in her expression had changed, a tension released, a certainty gained. The procedural requirements took only minutes to complete. Maxwell signed where indicated, his normally precise signature slightly unsteady with emotion. When he returned to Olivia, he knelt beside her wheelchair. "It's official," he said quietly. "You're stuck with me permanently now." Olivia's mouth formed that rare, genuine smile that transformed her serious face. She typed quickly. "Good." The courtroom gradually emptied as Rebecca, Dr. Park, and Chris approached to offer congratulations. "Well done, both of you," Rebecca said warmly. "This is a wonderful outcome." Chris clapped Maxwell on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Dad," he said with a grin. The simple word Dad landed with unexpected impact. Maxwell hadn't thought of himself in those terms, focused as he had been on the practical aspects of caring for Olivia. But now, legally and emotionally, that's what he was. Olivia seemed to register the significance as well. She typed a brief message and showed it just to Maxwell. "Does this mean I'm Olivia Pierce now?" Maxwell nodded. "If that's what you want. We can keep Carter as your middle name if you'd prefer." Olivia considered this, then typed, "Olivia Carter Pierce sounds right." As they prepared to leave the courthouse, Miriam approached with the final signed order. "Congratulations to you both," she said, handing the document to Maxwell. "The official certificate will be mailed in about 2 weeks." Outside, autumn sunshine bathed the courthouse steps in golden light. Jennifer helped Olivia navigate down the accessible ramp while Maxwell walked alongside. At the bottom, Olivia indicated she wanted to stop, typing a message for everyone. "Thank you all for helping us become a family." The simple sincerity of the statement brought smiles to all faces. Maxwell arranged for a celebration lunch at Olivia's favorite restaurant, a small Italian place that had made accommodations for her wheelchair and dietary preferences during previous visits. The meal was filled with conversation and laughter, Olivia participating actively through her tablet. Maxwell noticed she seemed more animated than usual, her expressions more varied, her responses quicker and more extensive. After lunch, as they prepared to return home, their home now officially shared, Maxwell received an unexpected call from Jonathan Meyer, his CFO. "Max, sorry to interrupt your day, but we've got a situation developing with the European merger. The German regulators are raising last-minute objections that could derail the entire deal." Maxwell glanced at Olivia, who was listening to Chris describe a new space exhibition coming to the Museum of Science. "How urgent is it, Jonathan?" "Critical. The regulatory window closes at midnight Berlin time. That's 6 hours from now. If we don't address their concerns immediately, we could lose a year of work and hundreds of millions in potential value." Before his life with Olivia, Maxwell would have immediately diverted to crisis management mode, cancelling all personal plans without hesitation. Now he hesitated, weighing competing priorities. "Give me 30 minutes to get home and set up. I'll video conference with the German team directly." He ended the call and turned to Olivia. "I'm sorry, but there's a work emergency I need to handle this afternoon. It's time-sensitive and couldn't have happened on a worse day." He watched her expression carefully, expecting disappointment or perhaps anxiety given their history with work interruptions. To his surprise, Olivia typed, "That's okay. We can continue celebrating later. Your work is important too." The simple maturity of this response touched Maxwell deeply. "Thank you for understanding. It shouldn't take more than a couple of hours." Chris offered to accompany them home and keep Olivia company while Maxwell handled the crisis. "We can check out those constellation identification apps I was telling her about," he suggested. The arrangement worked smoothly. While Maxwell sequestered himself in his office, navigating the complex regulatory challenges with his European team, Chris and Olivia explored digital astronomy resources in the living room. Jennifer prepared dinner, occasionally checking on Olivia, but giving her space to enjoy this special day. 3 hours later, Maxwell emerged from his office, crisis successfully averted. He found Olivia and Chris engaged in projecting constellations onto the ceiling using a new application they had discovered. "Crisis solved?" Chris asked. Maxwell nodded. "European regulators satisfied, merger proceeding on schedule." He turned to Olivia. "I'm sorry that interrupted our celebration day." Olivia typed, "Did you fix the problem?" "Yes, with help from our team in Berlin." "Then it was important to do," Olivia typed matter-of-factly. "Celebrating can happen any time." Maxwell was struck once again by her emotional intelligence and adaptability. "You're absolutely right. And I think celebration should definitely include ice cream after dinner." Olivia's subtle smile returned as she typed, "With chocolate sauce." "With double chocolate sauce," Maxwell confirmed, exchanging an amused glance with Chris. As they gathered around the dinner table, Maxwell, Olivia, Chris and Jennifer, Maxwell felt a sense of completeness he hadn't experienced since Eleanor's passing. Different, certainly, but equally meaningful. They weren't a conventional family by any definition, but they were undeniably a family. After dinner, as promised, elaborate ice cream sundaes were constructed with serious attention to architectural stability and chocolate distribution. Olivia approached the project with characteristic precision, carefully balancing toppings in a symmetrical pattern that made everyone smile. Later, as Maxwell performed their nightly reading ritual, he noticed Olivia seemed unusually restless, her attention drifting from the story. "Everything okay?" he asked, pausing in his reading. Olivia hesitated, then reached for her tablet. What she typed caught Maxwell completely off guard. "I want to try talking, not now, not yet, but someday. I think maybe I could." Maxwell carefully controlled his reaction, not wanting to create pressure or expectation. "That would be entirely your choice, Olivia. No timeline, no expectations. Your voice belongs only to you, to use or not use however you decide." Olivia nodded, seemingly relieved by this response. She typed again, "I might need help. From Dr. Park and maybe a speech therapist." "Whatever support you need, we'll arrange it," Maxwell assured her. "But only when and if you're ready." Olivia considered this, then typed a final message before settling in to resume the story. "Today made me feel safe enough to think about it, having it official." Maxwell understood exactly what she meant. The legal formalization had provided a security that allowed her to contemplate vulnerabilities she'd previously protected. "That makes me very happy," he said simply. "Not because of any potential speech, but because you feel secure." Olivia nodded, her expression peaceful as Maxwell returned to reading. Outside the penthouse windows, Boston's lights twinkled against the darkening sky, stars becoming visible in the clear September evening. Maxwell felt a profound gratitude for this unexpected path his life had taken, for the silent, watchful child who had somehow recognized in him a kindred spirit. The chapters ahead were unwritten, full of challenges and discoveries yet to come. But tonight, in this moment, their newly official family felt like the most natural thing in the world. Winter descended on Boston with characteristic intensity. By December, the city was transformed by snow, the penthouse windows offering spectacular views of white-dusted skyscrapers and frozen harbor waters. 4 months had passed since the adoption became official, and Maxwell and Olivia had settled into their life together with increasing comfort and mutual understanding. Olivia was now officially enrolled in an exclusive private school that specialized in individualized education for students with unique needs. After careful consideration of multiple options, Maxwell had selected Brighton Academy for its exceptional academic standards, fully accessible campus, and experience with non-traditional communication methods. Olivia attended 3 days weekly, with supplementary home tutoring for specialized subjects. The arrangement allowed her to experience classroom socialization while accommodating her medical appointments and occasional fatigue issues. Initially hesitant about school integration, Olivia had gradually begun forming cautious friendships with select classmates. Her academic performance was exemplary, particularly in sciences and literature, though she required adaptations for subjects involving verbal participation. Her astronomy interest had deepened into serious study, with Maxwell arranging for mentorship from an MIT astrophysicist who visited weekly. As Christmas approached, Maxwell noticed subtle changes in Olivia's demeanor. She seemed more contemplative than usual, occasionally appearing distracted during their evening routines. During one of their regular sessions with Dr. Park, Olivia unexpectedly typed, "I've been practicing talking, in private, when no one can hear me." Dr. Park maintained her professional composure, despite the significance of this revelation. "That's a big step, Olivia. How does it feel?" Olivia considered the question before typing, "Strange, my voice doesn't sound like I expected, and the words don't come easily." "That's completely normal after extended non-use of vocal communication," Dr. Park assured her. "Would you like to work with a speech therapist who specializes in situations like yours?" Olivia typed, "Maybe, but not yet. I'm not ready for anyone to hear me. Not even Maxwell." Dr. Park nodded. "That's absolutely your choice. There's no timeline or pressure. Would it help to know what to expect physiologically when you do begin speaking more regularly?" Olivia nodded. And Dr. Park provided a simple explanation of how vocal cords might initially feel weak or uncomfortable after prolonged disuse, but would strengthen with practice. Throughout this exchange, Maxwell remained silent, careful not to inject his own expectations or emotions. Privately, he felt both hopeful and protective, wanting Olivia to experience the freedom of verbal expression if she desired it, but equally committed to supporting her autonomy in the process. Later that evening, as they decorated the apartment for Christmas, Olivia's first true holiday celebration, Maxwell addressed the subject carefully. "Dr. Park mentioned you've been practicing speaking privately. I want you to know there's no expectation or pressure from me. Your communication choices are entirely yours to make." Olivia nodded, then typed, "I know. That's why I feel safe trying." The simple statement contained volumes about the trust they had built together. Maxwell smiled. "Whatever you decide, whatever form your voice takes, I'm here to listen." Christmas morning arrived with fresh snowfall. Maxwell had approached the holiday with characteristic thoroughness, researching appropriate gifts for a 9-year-old with Olivia's specific interests and needs. The living room held a carefully selected array of packages: books on advanced astronomy concepts, adaptive technology for more independent wheelchair navigation, a custom-designed star mapping program, and a few surprises Maxwell hoped would delight her. Olivia emerged from her room to find Maxwell already awake, preparing hot chocolate in the kitchen. Her expression brightened at the sight of the decorated living room, the snow falling gently beyond the windows, the collection of wrapped presents arranged beside the small tree they had decorated together. "Merry Christmas, Olivia," Maxwell greeted her. She typed quickly, "Merry Christmas. This looks like a magazine picture." Maxwell laughed. "I may have gone slightly overboard." First Christmas excitement. They settled in the living room, Maxwell sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Olivia's wheelchair as she opened her gifts. Each revelation brought careful examination and genuine appreciation, communicated through her increasingly expressive face and detailed tablet messages. When all her packages were opened, Olivia unexpectedly wheeled herself to her room, returning moments later with a clumsily wrapped package that she must have prepared with Jennifer's assistance. She handed it to Maxwell with an almost shy expression. Inside, he found a framed image, a composite photograph of a spiral galaxy with mathematical equations superimposed in gold lettering along its arms. At the bottom, a small plaque read, "To Maxwell, who saw me when others looked away. Love, Olivia." Maxwell stared at the gift, momentarily unable to speak. The thoughtfulness of it, the perfect encapsulation of their connection through shared interests, the simple "Love, Olivia," all combined to create an emotional impact he hadn't anticipated. "This is beautiful," he finally managed. "The most meaningful gift I've ever received." Olivia's expression softened at his genuine reaction. She typed, "Jennifer helped me order the galaxy image. I added the equations. They're the mathematical description of spiral arm formation." Of course she had. Maxwell smiled at this characteristic attention to scientific accuracy. "It's perfect. Thank you." The remainder of the day unfolded peacefully. Chris joined them for Christmas dinner, bringing additional gifts and holiday cheer. Snow continued falling outside, creating a cozy isolation that enhanced the intimate family atmosphere. As evening approached, Maxwell noticed Olivia growing quieter, her responses becoming more delayed and thoughtful. After Chris departed, they settled in the living room to watch a documentary about space exploration that had been on Olivia's wish list. Maxwell sensed her distraction but didn't press, allowing her the mental space she seemed to need. When the program ended, Maxwell began their usual bedtime routine, medication check with Jennifer, then reading in Olivia's room. Tonight's selection was the final chapters of A Wrinkle in Time, which they had been enjoying together for nearly 2 weeks. As Maxwell reached the book's conclusion, he noticed Olivia's expression had become unusually intense, her focus seemingly directed inward rather than on the story. "Everything okay?" he asked, closing the book as he finished the last page. Olivia nodded, then reached for her tablet. What she typed was unexpected. "I have another Christmas gift for you, but I'm nervous about it." Maxwell set the book aside, giving her his full attention. "You don't need to be nervous about anything with me, but there's also no obligation for additional gifts." Olivia typed again. "This one is difficult to give. I've been practicing for weeks." Something in her expression alerted Maxwell to the significance of the moment. He remained silent, allowing her to proceed at her own pace. Olivia's fingers hovered above her tablet, but instead of typing, she suddenly set it aside. She straightened in her wheelchair, her posture becoming more formal. Maxwell watched, uncertain what was happening but sensing its importance. Olivia took a deep breath, her expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability. Then, in a voice so soft and fragile it was barely audible, she spoke aloud for the first time. "Why did you come back for me?" The sound was raspy from disuse, the words slightly imprecise, but unmistakably her voice, higher than Maxwell had imagined, with a distinctive, gentle quality that seemed perfectly suited to her thoughtful personality. Maxwell felt his eyes immediately fill with tears, the emotion overwhelming and immediate. For a moment he couldn't respond, overcome by the profound trust this represented. He dropped to his knees beside her wheelchair, struggling to compose himself. "Olivia," he finally managed, his own voice unsteady. "That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard." She watched his reaction carefully, her expression vulnerable but determined. Maxwell took a breath, knowing the importance of his response to her actual question, not just the fact that she had spoken. "I came back because from the first moment I saw you, I recognized something in you that made me feel less alone in the world. Your dignity, your intelligence, your way of observing everything so carefully, it reminded me of myself." He paused, then added with complete honesty, "And once I knew you, I couldn't imagine walking away." Olivia's eyes filled with tears that matched his own. For several moments they remained in silent communion, the magnitude of what had just occurred filling the space between them. Then Olivia reached for her tablet, seemingly more comfortable returning to her established communication method. She typed, "I wanted you to hear my voice as a gift. I'm not ready to talk all the time yet." "That makes it even more precious," Maxwell assured her. "Your voice belongs to you alone to use whenever and however you choose." She typed again. "It felt important that you should be the first to hear it, since you were the reason I wanted to try." Maxwell nodded, understanding completely. "I'm honored beyond words, Olivia. Truly." That night, after Olivia had fallen asleep, Maxwell sat in the living room, watching the city lights through falling snow, processing the emotional impact of what had occurred. He thought about the journey that had brought them to this point, from his first glimpse of a solitary girl in a wheelchair to this moment of profound trust and connection. He thought about Eleanor, wondering what she would make of the family he had found in her absence. Somehow he felt certain she would approve. The following morning, Maxwell was careful not to create any expectation that Olivia would continue verbal communication. He maintained their usual routine, responding to her tablet messages as always. Dr. Park, when informed during their next session, approached the development with similar professional restraint, acknowledging its significance while emphasizing Olivia's autonomy in communication choices. "This represents extraordinary trust," she noted privately to Maxwell. "The fact that she chose to speak specifically to you, after years of silence, indicates the depth of security she feels in your relationship." In the weeks that followed, Olivia occasionally used verbal communication with Maxwell. Single words or brief phrases, always in private moments, always at her own initiative. These instances remained precious and relatively rare, interspersed with her primary tablet-based expression. Maxwell cherished each occurrence without expectation or pressure for more. By spring, Olivia had begun working with a specialized speech therapist, Dr. Meredith Johnson, who approached her unique situation with respect and patience. Their sessions focused on strengthening vocal muscles and developing comfort with verbal expression at Olivia's own pace. Dr. Johnson reported steady progress, though emphasized that Olivia might always prefer written communication in many contexts. Many children with Olivia's history Develop a mixed communication style, she explained during a consultation with Maxwell. Verbal expression in certain situations or with specific people, written or digital communication in others. The goal isn't necessarily traditional speech patterns, but rather expanding her communication options in ways that feel comfortable and authentic to her. This perspective aligned perfectly with Maxwell's approach. His priority remained Olivia's sense of security and self-determination, not conformity to conventional expectations. As the one-year anniversary of their first meeting approached, Maxwell found himself reflecting on the profound changes in both their lives. His business empire continued to thrive under the restructured leadership model, though his personal involvement had shifted dramatically. His priorities had transformed entirely. The measure of success now found in Olivia's growing confidence and their evolving family bond rather than corporate acquisitions or profit margins. Olivia herself had blossomed in ways that continually surprised and delighted him. Her academic achievements were remarkable, her social connections gradually expanding, her emotional expression increasingly nuanced. She had begun participating in an adaptive astronomy club at the local planetarium, sharing her knowledge with other children interested in space science. The milestone of their first meeting seemed to warrant recognition. Maxwell arranged a small celebration, inviting only those central to their journey: Chris, Rebecca, Dr. Park, and Jennifer. The gathering was held at the penthouse on a perfect September evening. The space transformed from its former austere elegance to a true family home with evidence of Olivia's presence integrated throughout. Accessible pathways between furniture, astronomy books and equipment sharing space with business journals, photographs of their outings displayed alongside Maxwell's industry awards. The physical evolution of the space mirrored the emotional evolution of their relationship, deliberate adaptations becoming natural integration. As they gathered in the living room after dinner, Rebecca raised her glass in a toast. To remarkable journeys and unexpected families. Maxwell and Olivia, what you've built together inspires all of us. Maxwell smiled, glancing at Olivia, who sat nearby with her tablet ready. I think Olivia might want to respond to that, he said, recognizing her expression. Everyone expected her to type a message as usual. Instead, Olivia straightened in her wheelchair, took a deep breath and spoke aloud, softly but clearly, her voice growing stronger with each word. Thank you for helping us find each other, for not giving up when things were difficult. The room fell silent, those familiar with Olivia's history visibly moved by this public demonstration of trust and progress. Chris was the first to recover, raising his glass higher. To finding your voice in whatever form it takes. The celebration continued, with Olivia returning to her tablet for most communication, but occasionally offering verbal responses to direct questions, a new pattern she had been developing gradually over recent weeks. Later, as their guests prepared to leave, Rebecca pulled Maxwell aside. I've worked in child services for 25 years, she said quietly. What you've accomplished with Olivia, the trust you've built, the security you've created that allows her to take these steps, it's extraordinary. Maxwell shook his head slightly. She's the extraordinary one. I've just provided the space for her to feel safe enough to show it. After everyone had departed, Maxwell and Olivia settled in their favorite window seat, watching stars appear in the clear night sky. That was a big step today, Maxwell observed. Speaking in front of everyone. Olivia nodded, typing on her tablet. It felt right. Still scary, but right. You never cease to amaze me with your courage, Maxwell told her sincerely. Olivia considered this, then set aside her tablet. In her soft but increasingly confident voice, she said, You gave me something worth being brave for. The simple statement encompassed their entire journey, from silence to voice, from isolation to connection, from uncertainty to family. Maxwell placed his arm gently around her shoulders, and together they watched the night sky deepen, stars emerging one by one above the city that had become truly home. In his office at Pierce Technologies, a framed note hung prominently on the wall. It contained the first message Olivia had ever typed specifically for him on the day they had discussed the possibility of adoption. Thank you for not giving up on my silence. Beside it now hung a second frame, a recording device that contained Olivia's first spoken words to him, preserved as the precious gift it was. Together, they represented the different voices that made their unusual family complete. The written and the spoken, the expressed and the understood, the journey from silence to communication in all its forms. Outside the penthouse windows, Boston stretched toward the horizon, its lights blending with the stars above. Within those walls, a family created against all conventional expectations continued writing their unique story together. One word, one day, one moment of connection at a time. At the top of the stairs, where Olivia's wheelchair lift connected the split-level portions of the penthouse, Maxwell had installed a small plaque, not visible to visitors, but positioned where both he and Olivia would see it daily. It contained a simple inscription: "For you who didn't give up on my silence. For me who heard what you couldn't say." Family found, not formed. The words, composed together during one of their evening conversations, captured the essence of their connection. Two people who had recognized in each other the capacity to understand what remained unspoken, to value what others overlooked, to form a bond that transcended conventional definitions but met the deepest human need for belonging. As Olivia fell asleep that night, Maxwell stood in her doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. He thought about the silent, solitary man he had been a year earlier, locked in grief and isolation, about the watchful, wordless child who had somehow recognized in him a kindred spirit, about the family they had forged together, word by word, day by day, silence by silence, and finally voice by precious voice. "Good night, Olivia," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. "Thank you for finding me when I was lost." In her sleep, Olivia smiled slightly, as though somehow receiving the message that, like so many between them, required no sound to be perfectly understood. Maxwell closed her door gently, leaving it open just enough to hear if she needed him in the night. In the morning, they would continue their journey together, two once solitary souls who had found in each other the rarest gift of all, someone who truly listened, whether the words were spoken aloud or carried in the eloquent silence of complete understanding.